Hey guys, how are we doing? Crypto Insight UK here, bringing you back another YouTube video. So I just want to start by saying this was the title of our weekly insight last week, major XRP movements. And my first paragraph is staying bullish through the noise. And I want to just reiterate this on this YouTube. I'm going to start this week's newsletter the same way as I have for a while now by saying that I'm bullish. Nothing's changed in that regard. I remain bullish. I think we're probably moving away from the strict 4-year cycle, or at least not as it has been as rigid as before. The overall picture still looks positive. The macro backdrop is positive, whichever way you look at it. Now, with all that being said, this week we've got a massive amount of potential catalysts. We've got the trade deals with China, which are ongoing. They're looking positive at the minute, but they've not been straightforward for the whole time. So anything could happen either way with that. I do think that there will be a positive trade deal at the back of that, because you can't sit here and be a pessimist about life generally. Because I think if we don't get a trade deal, things are looking pretty bleak for the future. So you have to, in my opinion, play on the side of positivity there. And I do think that that is what comes out, but whether in the meantime there's still some more jostling for position and some weird news, I don't know. So that could be a catalyst one way or another in price action. We've got FOMC this week, and the US government are still to come back with the potential of ETFs, and that's something I discussed in this newsletter as well. So they are things to just keep your eye on. So the US government statistically should be back by November the 30th, but 56% chance they're back by November the 15th, which is still 2 weeks away. CZ's pardon, we discussed this on YouTube on Friday as well. I think that that's a pivotal moment for the ecosystem generally of crypto. I think there's momentum building for XRP right now, the potential ETF listings when the US government come back. I also think that we've got Ripple swell on November the 4th and 5th, and we've not actually seen a Ripple swell since Ripple haven't been under the investigation of the SEC. So let's see what happens there. We've not seen like one where they've had a year to basically build after that. One second, temperature jump off and boiling. I'm still on vacation, guys, so that's why the YouTube quality is a bit weird and sporadic on videos as well. So I'm still like moving around. I'm back actually to Dubai on Friday. I've highlighted that XRP memes are starting to wake up a little bit. They pulled back a bit yesterday, but like Drop, for example, is the one that I use in this in my newsletter. It's something that I hold. It was a few %% off the lows, which is pretty cool. This is quite an interesting point from Arthur Hayes. He talks about how the new Japanese Prime Minister is looking to essentially tackle inflation by giving stimulus, which is the thing that he says causes inflation, but he doesn't really give a shit because he thinks that it's going to take Bitcoin to 1 million over time. And this is the important thing that I wanted to really highlight. There's a lot of negativity out there, but the Russell 2000, which looks like this, I basically said 5 years ago, and I relate to Raoul Pal's 5-year refinancing of debt, not the 4-year cycle because of C19. So you need to watch his video about that if you want to understand that a bit more. 5 years ago, it was November the 2nd when we broke out for the Russell 2000, which would give us maybe a week for a considerable breakout, and we'll get into that in a second. And I also discussed how gold is potentially topped and what Bitcoin dominance is looking at. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through and have a little look at all these things. But just before we do that, what I'm just going to quickly highlight here, one thing this morning is China's largest fintech company, China's largest fintech company, Ant Group, just filed for a multi-crypto related trademark, including Antcoin. And I think this could be maybe part of the US-China deal, talking about crypto potentially. That's my own specific speculation. Like, there's nothing else from that. So a lot of people are saying ETH is looking more bullish than XRP right now. From a standard classical charting perspective, ETH looks pretty good. And it actually looks like if we complete this wedge, this is on the weekly time frame, it would be a 20k ETH, and I think that would bring a lot of people, like shock a lot of people right now. And I'm not saying we go there instantly. It could take a while, but I'm just showing you a potential here. On the other side of that, though, people are saying that XRP doesn't look that good. I would tend to differ with the argument. We've discussed market makers in the newsletter this week and last week. All the liquidity for XRP is on the upside now. On the weekly time frame, as you can see, XRP pulled back nicely on Binance. This is into the area of consolidation, like we wicked into the top, where this right here was when Judge Torres said that XRP was not a security. We wicked into that and held that support. And look at all the buying pressure that brought us all the way back up into the range that we're in now. People are being bearish on the monthly time frame, but I say zoom out and maybe look at the 3-month. The 3-month looks pretty positive. Again, shows down into that area of demand and quickly push back up in price, but we aren't seeing a lot of volume, which is the only thing to keep an eye on. And I discussed what a measured move would look like from the last time we were oversold on the daily, which was literally the lows at about 30 cent. To where we went in terms of like the 270, then the 330, and then recently the 360. If we did a measured move like that now, it would take us up towards like the $13-14, then 16, and then potentially a little bit higher towards the end of next year. That's measured move in terms of time and price. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen, but I'm just saying that's what a measured move would do. So let's have a look at TradingView. Let's have a look at Bitcoin on the weekly. Let's have a look at gold. Let's have a look at these things. Let's start with gold, then we'll look at the Russell, then we'll look at Bitcoin, okay? Gold, again, today is continuing to fall, 1.85% down. The weekly, big volume on gold, big selling volume, and potentially a bearish cross here for gold. So let's take us down to the daily time frame. Put it on a range, one sec. Let's take us down to the daily time frame. Give me 1 minute. And I've also put us on, let's get on candles. On the daily time frame, you can see we lost this ascending wedge, and since then gold's been like fighting to not break down completely, and the volume on the red days is more significant than that on the green. This is spelling to me like short-term top or distribution, at least for gold. How far down we come is anyone's discussion, but that is potential capital that can rotate out of there. I think this is a lot to do with the China-US trade deal. I think people are like, they were using gold to hedge against that. Also, the Chinese were buying a lot of gold, provably by their balance sheet. And I said maybe there's going to be some sort of crypto discussion within the trade deal. I don't know for sure, that's speculation, but maybe there is. And if not, if people are seeing positivity out the trade deal, a lot of this capital might rotate and into risk on assets, which includes crypto in my opinion, and also includes things like the Russell 2000, which is why you see Russell 2000 right up at all-time highs, trying to break through. And as I discussed at the start of the video, potentially the 3rd of November for that breakout, if we live literally in a simulation and we do exactly what we did 5 years ago. It was almost to the day. Like the triple tap that I talked about, wrote about this, 1, 2, 3 goes at the all-time high, 1, 2, 3 goes on the all-time high, on the 3rd go we break, on the 3rd go we break, and it actually takes us to the 1.618 Fibonacci extension, which would take the Russell up to 2,970. Now that's not a massive move, but it's also not tiny. It's about 17% here. That would be fantastic for altcoins. When the Russell breaks, altcoins normally go with it. The S&P continuing to set new all-time highs, even as people write it off every single time we have a small little pullback. Everyone's calling for 1920s, 1930s depression. So, and if that's like, I'm not writing that off in the future, but I just don't think we're there now. I actually think crypto's got a significant way to run before that. And just looking at on the weekly time frame at Bitcoin's weekly close, it's not confirmation of bullish price action here for Bitcoin, but it's certainly better than when we were down at like the 104 level. At 115, we're still in like a decision-making period. But as I said, ETH itself looks great. ETH weekly looks great, holding on top of this previous wedge. That would be the breakout target. I'm not saying, again, we get there in one go, but I am saying that things look pretty good for ETH. XRP, we've discussed XRP already. Flare is another one. I'm bullish Flare. I think if XRP does well, Flare's going to do well. Flare has hit $100 million worth of XRP on Flare networks. This is just looks like compression to me. We still have some Flare drops. So there will always be a little bit of downward price action or pressure whilst we're getting Flare drops. But everyone who holds Flare is getting some free Flare for the next like 2-3 months. And then when that's done, I think that the narrative towards Flare will change quite quickly. Bitcoin dominance is one of the things I discussed in the newsletter. What I was saying is this. I'm going to take us to the daily time frame to look at this. It might be a bit messy. But what I'm saying is, look, we're holding this like ascending wedge pattern. This is a reversal pattern. You'd be looking for a minimum breakdown target of 57.4, which is like a percent to the downside from here for Bitcoin dominance. If we break the downside, it teased it yesterday and then so far has broken back up again today. Definitely something to watch out for. As you guys know, over time, this is what I think happens. Let's get rid of that now. This is what I think happens for dominance. I think we set lower lows this cycle. And I think that trend continues forever over time. I discussed this with my friend this morning. What I basically said was, in the world of crypto, you think it's going to go to infinity or zero over time. And if it goes to infinity, yes, Bitcoin could have a huge part of that. So let's say it does something like gold and is like a $30 trillion asset, that'd be fantastic. But if the rest of the space is another 200 trillion plus over time, I'm not saying this is going to happen next week at all, but over time, let's say the rest of the space is 200 trillion to like a quadrillion, which is what derivatives markets are, or everything moves on chain over time, then Bitcoin's like percentage role in that is tiny. In comparison, doesn't mean Bitcoin can't go to millions of dollars a token, but it does mean that there is more opportunity for everything else in the space should we get adoption and it's not just used as a hedge against legacy financial assets. That's basically my thought process on Bitcoin dominance. And I also think that technically this is a continuation pattern. When you fall into a range, you should continue the same direction that you came into the range a lot of the time, especially when you're setting like lower highs potentially. And then people could argue, oh, we could set a lower low. But then I would also then argue that that's continued compression before you continue downwards as well. So I do think that Bitcoin dominance looks bearish. Doesn't mean this cycle we can't do something like this, for example. Doesn't mean we can't like come down to this level, then bounce and come back up to here and then continue. But I think this is a bearish pattern for Bitcoin dominance, which is obviously good for alts. Now, with that being said, I showed you liquidity at the start of this video, and liquidity on Bitcoin literally sits above us. We'll finish with that, and then I will sign off for today because, as I said, I'm still on vacation. If we look at Bitcoin, I'm going to take us to the daily. If we look at the liquidity pools on Bitcoin, what we can see is above us is the densest area of liquidity. There's liquidity now building quite heavily up at their 142. And that's essentially where I expect price to go to. And there's no more and no less than that I can say than that. It could go above 153 here based just on liquidity alone. That is where the market makers and the exchanges will take it over time because that's where they make money. Does it mean it goes there today? No. Does it mean it goes there tomorrow? No. But it could. You've seen with Bitcoin, you can just print like a few days worth of green candles, and then that's a lot of excitement coming all at once. But then if my thesis is right about Bitcoin dominance, guys, then it's looking pretty exciting for the rest of this cycle after that, especially when you take into consideration the RTY as well. So let's see. Time's something I can't tell, but price action is what I'm looking at. Price action looks good. We're holding pretty strong. And the future looks positive for crypto. That's what I think. We've got the biggest financial economies in the world having a discussion about a trade deal now. Trump's massively pro-crypto. We've seen a new CFTC chair this week who's pro-crypto. The administration, the US administration, I think is going to work crypto into the markets. And I do think that's something to do with the liquidation event that we had. And that's all my own speculation. But if we're right, even slightly in the direction of that, there's a lot of upside potential here for crypto. So with all that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share it with a friend. If you want to sign up to any exchange, I've got a link to WEX and MEXC in the description of this video. If you want to check out my newsletter, there's also a link to that in the description. As always, nothing I say is financial advice, but I do hope you enjoyed. Peace up, A-Town Downs, Crypto Insight UK would say.